from that to a cleaner subject, the Buddha.
Yeah.
So what's the Gandharan Buddha doing in Sweden? Was anyone worshipping it? Have we got sort of proto-hippie sort of Dharma bums sitting in Gotland at this time, or what's going on?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure we can ever answer it confidently.
And if you had to sort of take a scholarly middle path here and try and, leaving politics aside, I mean, how far the Rus are presumably, you have the Vikings setting up river settlements where you're finding more carnelian beads, incidentally, from Gujarat in Ukraine. So the Ukrainian students stuck in Kiev and in Ukraine today are not the first things from India. There was Indian goods and possibly Indian people in Kiev in the 9th century. Yeah,
so we've finding matching completely identical beads in these settlements as well. So it's such a key part of that trading route. And it's not very far up from Constantinople.
This is the Gujarat model gone crazy. Indian exports already in Kiev in the 9th century. This is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And before we've only got 5 minutes more, but so we have to ask you about two things. First of all, funeral orgies. Tell us about Viking funeral orgies.
So this, if you remember,
there aren't nearly enough funeral orgies in the world today.
No, I don't think so. So the image you might remember earlier of the ship burial. So this is one of those Arabic accounts. So one of the Arabic travelers called Ibn Fadlan traveled along the Volga, and he encountered these people called the Rus, and he describes them very carefully.
And he says they're very good looking.
They're very beautiful. They're the tallest, I think he says, most beautiful specimens he's ever seen. They're tall and they're blue-eyed, covered in tattoos as well, so which is why the sort of Netflix Viking series got their idea from. But he is there when one of the chieftains dies, so he is allowed to observe this whole funeral rite, and has some amazing parallels in the archaeological record that we have from Scandinavia as well. There's a ship burial, the chieftain dies, but there's a 10-day party essentially leading up to it. And this, for this, a slave girl is asked to sacrifice herself. So they go around and say who would be sacrificed to become chieftain's wife in death. So one of the girls, one of the young women, volunteers for this.
Presumably not optionally.
Well, so there's a lot of discussion on this. I mean, usually that's a sort of thought not, but actually, if you look at what that means for her, so she's being treated essentially like a queen for the next 10 days, and in death, her status is elevated to the chieftain's wife. And if you think of a world where the border between life and death is different from ours, this is just a continuation. So actually, this is quite a good deal for her. But the process is quite harrowing. But she's being treated very well for 10 years. She gets jewelry, she gets plied with alcohol and food and drink. But she's then asked to go and have sex with all the chieftain's men, who say...
Netflix has actually toned it down.
It's very much
when we
from
see these
story.
Netflix romps, they're not sort of hyped up. They're the Bowdlerized version of what actually happened.
They come from these records. So this is clearly a very key part of the whole process. Eventually, she does get murdered by somebody called the Angel of Death, who's an elderly woman. So this is the witch character. And then taken, and the whole boat is set alight at the end by a man who's naked, and he lights it, and then he walks backwards, holding his hand, covering his anus as he's walking away from the fire. Again, these details, we don't quite know why, but
this is the Arab account, firsthand, or something he's actually seen.
It is.
And so from that to a cleaner subject, the Buddha. So what's the Gandharan Buddha doing in Sweden? Was anyone worshipping it? Have we got sort of proto-hippie sort of Dharma bums sitting in Gotland at this time, or what's going on?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure we can ever answer it confidently. It actually had a string around it, a long string wrapped around its neck. So it looked like carried around somebody's neck, which I think is quite a key point. It's an ornament, but it is quite large. So
if you think of those early Anglo-Saxon crosses, you have monks with Bibles around their necks and crosses around their necks. So
I think we need to consider the possibility that this is a religious symbol, and that the knowledge is there. We sort of assume, obviously, Buddhism isn't taken up in Scandinavia at all, but that doesn't mean that we don't have people who understand the symbol, understand what it means. We obviously have the Muslim symbols on the coins, and there's various rings, there's other objects with inscriptions relating to Islam in Scandinavia. So the question is, could we maybe have all these religions?
If you've enjoyed the conversation that you just heard, do subscribe to our channel for much more.